Good Friday morning, everyone, and welcome into today's daily Bible reading for August the 11th. Today we are reading together in 2 Samuel chapter 6. 2 Samuel chapter 6, you will recall yesterday as we were reading together in 2 Samuel chapter 5 that we see at the end of the text that David did exactly as Yahweh commanded him, and he struck down the Philistines all the way from Geba to Gazer. David, as he obeys Yahweh and is very careful to follow his instructions, good things happen and they are blessed in whatever it is that they do. However, the opposite is also true, that whenever David does not do as Yahweh commands, whenever people disobey the instructions of Yahweh, well, at that point, bad things occur. And that's exactly what we end up seeing here in chapter 6, unfortunately. Let me go and get the text up on the screen for us of 2 Samuel chapter 6. And we'll get to read here together about David moving the ark, not doing so successfully to begin with, but thankfully eventually getting it right. So let's read about that here in 2 Samuel chapter 6 and verse number 1. 2 Samuel chapter 6 and verse number 1. David again assembled all the fit young men in Israel, 30,000. He and all his troops set out to bring the ark of God from Baale, Judah. The ark bears the name of the Yahweh of armies, who is enthroned between the cherubim. They set the ark of God on a new cart and transported it from Abinadab's house, which was on the hill. Now, that's actually, I'll talk about all this later. Uzzah and Eo, sons of Abinadab, were guiding the cart and brought it with the ark of God from Abinadab's house on the hill. Ahio walked in front of the ark. David and the whole house of Israel were dancing before Yahweh with all kinds of firwood instruments, lyres, harps, tambourines, sistrums, and cymbals. When they came to Nachon's threshing floor, Uzzah reached out to the ark of God and took hold of it because the oxen had stumbled. Then Yahweh's anger burned against Uzzah, and God struck him dead on the spot for his irreverence, and he died there next to the ark of God. David was angry because of Yahweh's outburst against Uzzah, so he named that place Outburst Against Uzzah, as it is today. David feared Yahweh that day and said, "How can the ark of Yahweh ever come to me?" So he was not willing to bring the ark of Yahweh to the city of David. Instead, he diverted it to the house of Obed Edom of Goth. The ark of Yahweh remained in his house 3 months, and Yahweh blessed Obed Edom and his whole family. It was reported to King David that Yahweh has blessed Obed Edom's family and all that belongs to him because of the ark of God. So David went and had the ark brought up from Obed Edom's house to the city of David with rejoicing. When those carrying the ark of Yahweh advanced 6 steps, he sacrificed an ox and fatted calf. He sacrificed an ox and a fatted calf. David was dancing with all his might before Yahweh, wearing a linen ephod. He and the whole house of Israel were bringing up the ark of Yahweh with shouts and sounds of the ram's horn. As the ark of Yahweh was entering the city of David, Saul's daughter Michal looked down from the window and saw King David leaping and dancing before Yahweh, and she despised him in her heart. They brought the ark of Yahweh and set it in its place inside the tent David had pitched for it. Then David offered burnt offerings and fellowship offerings in Yahweh's presence. When David had finished offering the burnt offering and the fellowship offerings, he blessed the people in the name of Yahweh of armies. Then he distributed a loaf of bread, a date cake, and a raisin cake to each one of the entire Israelite community, both men and women. And then all the people went home. When David returned home to bless his household, Saul's daughter Michal came out to meet him. "Oh, how the king of Israel honored himself today," she said. "He exposed himself today in the sight of the slave girls of his subjects like a vulgar person would expose himself." David replied to Michal, "It was before Yahweh who chose me over your father and his whole family to appoint me ruler over Yahweh's people Israel. I will dance before Yahweh, and I will dishonor myself and humble myself even more. However, by the slave girls you spoke about, I will be honored. And Saul's daughter Michal had no children to the day of her death. And that is, excuse me, Second Samuel, chapter 6. Again, we end chapter 5 on this high note of Yahweh blessing David because of his obedience to him. And we get into chapter 6, and David's not doing anything necessarily that's wrong here. It is good for Yahweh's ark, for his presence, the place where he dwells, to be among his king. And yet, unfortunately, what we see here is they don't do it the right way. Now, they might have no idea that this is doing it the wrong way, because remember the story of the Philistines. How did it get to Abinadab's house to begin with? Well, that takes us back to 1 Samuel chapter 7. Remember, the ark has been captured. It's been taken to Philistine territory. It keeps knocking over the idol statue of Dagon, and they end up, it also causes all sorts of issues among the Philistine people. They don't know what to do with it. They end up sticking it on a road, on a cart, and they see which way the cart pulled by cows goes, and it's going its way toward Israel. The people there look at it, although they shouldn't. They get in trouble. It ends up finding its way to Abinadab's house, and it's been there for decades. If me just thinking about it, if that happened prior to the time of Saul, and that we're now past the time of Saul, I believe Saul reigned 42 years. It's been in Abinadab's house for 42 plus years, something like that. It's been there for 4+ decades. It's been a long time. It's time for it to be returned to the rightful place. And yet they don't go about the right way, because the law was very clear that it was to have poles put through the rings at the corners and carried by Levitical priests. I believe specifically the house of Kohath was supposed to do this. So it was not to be touched. It was to be revered and honored, and yet they don't do it the right way. They are not mindful of this very holy object, which in and of itself represents the presence of God. And if God takes it this seriously, that an object representing his presence, whenever it is disrespected, to come down so harshly as he did against Uzzah, then how much more should we take seriously God's presence with us, and making sure that we are honoring and revering him as his presence is with us. Of course, this was a very sad occasion here for Uzzah to lose his life in this manner, and David is very upset by this. He might be thinking, how can I please God? If this type of thing would anger him to the point of killing someone, then how can I possibly please him? We're not given as much detail. I believe, again, that this account is given elsewhere. I believe that's correct, and there is more. In First Chronicles 15, there is more detail given there. So we'll talk about that later on once we get to the Chronicles. I'm just going to stick with what's here in 2 Samuel just to stick here. But eventually they do get it right. They do get the priests, they do get the poles, they do carry it the correct way, and they end up taking it into Jerusalem. And David is very excited about this. The text tells us that he was dancing with all his might before Yahweh, wearing the linen ephod. So he's not dressed like a king, he's dressed like a priest. And he's dancing around with great joy before the Lord. This was a very joyous occasion. This was a time of true celebration. And he's going all out and experiencing that with his people, except Michal, Saul's daughter. She doesn't like that very much. It seems that she doesn't like the fact that David's acting like a normal person, that he's not behaving himself like a king should, like, let's say, her father did. Remember, Saul was very concerned with appearances, and he dare not allow any appearance of his to be less than stellar. So for her, this was just this is her thinking the way her father thought. And that's not a good thing whatsoever. Saul was not exactly known for thinking things through very well. So after she chastises David, really just lays on the sarcasm and just the hatefulness, David responds with, listen, what I was doing, after he just completely dunks on her about Yahweh having chosen him instead of her father as king, he stresses here that what I am concerned with is not honoring you. I'm not concerned with honoring other people. I'm concerned with honoring God. And that certainly is a lesson that he learned during the course of this whole experience, wasn't it? During the course of this 3-month experience, at least, where all this was taking place, he realized how important it is to be most concerned about God. And we should too. We should take away from this text to be most concerned with God, to be most concerned with his instructions. Whenever he has clearly stated something, we need to honor that. We need to show our reverence for him by being obedient to his instructions. But we also recognize that the lives we live for God, not for other people. And that's true about really any aspect of our lives, and true about worship. When we worship, we're worshiping for God, not for other people. And there should be a real joy that is present within us when we worship. Yes, there is a degree to which we do not want to be distracting to other people or offensive to other people, but it's okay to be real and genuine in our worship, especially if that's coming from sincerity. Again, sincerity, there's lines that don't need to be crossed. Again, being respectful and non offensive and such. But again, our greatest concern should be with God and being sincere towards him, truly pouring out our hearts in worship to him. Michal thought that it needed to look a very buttoned up certain way. But David said, no, no, no. I'm not concerned with you. I'm not concerned with others. I'm concerned with God. And that's a good lesson for us to learn. We see at the end here that Saul's daughter Michal had no children to the day of her death. Was this a punishment by God closing up her womb? Or could it be that at this point her and David are estranged? And there's no longer that love that had once been present with her. They had a lot of drama in their marriage for various reasons. And maybe at this point, that was just the straw that broke the camel's back. But again, just very sad seeing everything basically that Saul touches, everything that's really associated with him, go so poorly. So we'll continue on reading tomorrow in 2 Samuel chapter 7. I hope that you'll tune in for that. If you have any questions, comments, observations about 2 Samuel chapter 6, please feel free to leave that in the comment section below. Just keep in mind as well that Chronicles is going to retell some of these stories with different details. So we'll address that. And since we have already read this text, we'll draw in some differences and comparisons once we get to those stories being retold in those texts. But hope you will have a great rest of your Friday. We wish a very happy birthday to my dad. It is his birthday today, and him and my mom have been spending some time together down on the beach in Alabama, which again, I will never get over how just weird that sounds, being at the beach in Alabama. But that's what they've been doing this week. I hope they've had a great time. Hope my dad has a great birthday as well. Again, have a great rest of y'all's Friday. I'll see you again tomorrow. We'll be reading tomorrow on Saturday, August the 12th from 2 Samuel chapter 7. Hope to see you then. Take care and God bless.